In a city, a group of people had stopped a young man. One of them asked if he is going to the scripture pavilion to read again, saying that if they had to name who in the outer sect is most eager to learn, it would be Jiachi. Another member of the group says he heard that Jiachi has already read all the books in the scripture pavilion twice and learned 2 secret techniques. Jiachi remains silent, seeing that they are about to start again and apparently are still not tired of it. Other youths say that all of this sounds very beautiful, but that Jiachi is asking for the impossible, since he is a theoretical type and has no spiritual power in his body, so even if he learned a technique, he would not be able to use it. They continue mocking him, saying they had forgotten about that and ask if he is angry, but Jiachi simply keeps walking, saying that he is not crazy. 3 years have passed since he transmigrated to that world and witnessed the patience of Li Yuanxing and his lackeys, who must be very bored to torment him every day. However, this kind of moral harassment is only the tip of the iceberg compared to what he went through as a corporate slave. Yuanxing remains irritated and grabs Jiachi, explaining that he is always bothered by that disgusting face and that he needs to stop pretending, because although he looks very calm, he must be terrified inside. Therefore, he should kneel down and beg Yuanxing to let him go, and maybe he would even give him some scraps later. Jiachi only asks him to let go. Yuanxing feels offended and says that he is the young master of the Heavenly Sword Alliance, and once Jiachi offends him, he will be expelled from the outer sect and no one will be able to protect him. He also says that Jiachi has been cultivating for 8 years and is still only at the first stage of Ling Shui, that not even dogs would look at trash like him. Jiachi remains calm, saying that he never asked for anyone's approval. Suddenly, someone approaches, saying that the precepts of Kongming forbid attacking other disciples. Yuanxing releases Jiachi and starts smiling again, saying that it was just a friendly training session with his older brother. However, he did not expect Jiachi to be so weak, so they will stop there. The man says it is very good to see that everything is fine, but that he must immediately return to the training grounds to continue cultivating. Yuanxing calls his companions and starts to leave. The man goes to the protagonist and asks if he has thought about what they discussed a few days ago. Jiachi ends up averting his gaze as he is not considering that possibility. The man explains that the protagonist has already been in that sect for 8 years and has barely managed to reach the first stage of Ling Shui. Therefore, there is no need to waste more time, and he is doing this for Jiachi's own good because if he leaves the outer sect earlier, he might be able to find a new path. The protagonist thanks the steward for his kindness, but says he has his own plans and still needs to go to the scripture pavilion to read. As Jiachi leaves, the steward asks if he really believes he can smash headfirst into a wall facing south. The protagonist is just someone who has been cultivating for 8 years, so he is considered a worthless person who deserves some insults. In addition to having a plain and unremarkable appearance, 3 years ago he transmigrated to that world after waking up, and besides inheriting some of the original owner's memories, he did not receive any advantage whatsoever. Moreover, within 15 minutes, he already knew that the body he had obtained possessed inferior spiritual roots and was not suitable for cultivation. Although he could not cultivate anything and did not know what his goal with the transmigration was, he imagined that there might be free food and shelter there, so he decided to stay for a while. He looks at one of the books, saying that after reading that one, he will have finished all of the classics of the scripture pavilion. However, the thoughts in his head do not stop because 3 years have already passed, and probably after that another 3 years will come, and even so, nothing will change. He remembers that when he was a bit younger, his teacher had taught him many things, and although his cultivation is at a dead end, his theoretical knowledge is at the highest level, and perhaps one day he might discover a cultivation genius. He sits on the ground and starts reading the book because he heard that on the first day of the next month, the 4 immortals of the sacred domain will hold the 135th selection to train direct disciples. After hundreds of years, the inner and outer sects have practically given up on competing, not to mention breaking the 9 heavens calamity annihilation formation created by the glass lamp empress. The 99 steps of the Jade Heaven stairway also represent a superhuman challenge. Therefore, as a novice in cultivation, still at the first stage, he should join in the fun. A few hours later, still sitting in the scripture pavilion, he finally finishes reading all the books. Suddenly, a screen appears saying that the Fury system has been activated. The protagonist is startled, and the system explains that this is because he completed the beginner's secret mission, which was to read all the books in the scripture pavilion, all of the pavilion's classics, and because of that, the system is now officially active. From now on, he only needs to enrage organic matter to obtain system missions and items. He still cannot believe that the system has appeared, since he lived like a nobody for 3 years. In the books, there are golden houses, 1,000 measures of grain and beauties, and now he can add one more thing. Within books, there exists a golden finger. At that moment, he was so shocked that he could not clearly hear the system's category. He imagined that the system he obtained after 3 years of reading would be very elegant, dignified, and cultured. But when he came to his senses, 3 days later, the protagonist was running through a crowd of completely enraged people who were chasing after him. That system is useful, but its side effect is creating enemies everywhere, with hatred points maxed out. Because of this, the protagonist does not see the system as a stroke of luck, but as someone deliberately messing with him. As soon as he manages to escape from the people, the system says that the first task has been issued and that he can now choose to accept or reject it. Xiachi asks what happens if he rejects it, and the system says it will be immediate elimination. The protagonist asks why, and the system gives examples asking whether he should pull down his pants and then fart. Messages keep appearing, saying that it is not about pulling down his pants, much less farting, and that if the task is not completed, he will also be eliminated immediately. After this information, the protagonist feels more loved and says that the system really is incredible. A countdown begins, asking whether he would like to accept or reject it. Xiachi has no idea how much the system could hate him to start a countdown at a moment like that. He decides to accept and asks what the mission is. He must become a direct disciple of the 4 immortals of the sacred domain. Xiachi begins to despair because he does not know how that could possibly be achieved. In the sacred domain of Kangming, since the establishment of the 4 immortals, no disciple has ever reached the top of the 99 steps of the Jade Heaven Stairway, and no one has managed to pass through the 9 Heavens Calamity Annihilation Array created by the Glass Lamp Empress. However, on that day, history would be rewritten. The protagonist was climbing the stairway. A system notification says that to break the array, 23.33 burn-up value points are required. As he walks, the system continues loading. Upon reaching the top, he tries to dissipate the Calamity Annihilation Array. The array begins to crack and a hole is opened. Pressure starts to emanate from within, and something begins to interact with the protagonist's body, sending him flying far away where he lands on the top of a peak. Still lying there, he thinks that he is exhausted and wonders whether that counts as passing the evaluation of the 4 immortals. Suddenly, someone approaches and asks how he did in the evaluation. When he looks up a bit, he realizes that this is the facade of the divine palace of Kangming, and the only people who live there are the 4 immortals of the sacred domain. He sees a girl in front of him and asks who she is, and even though he thinks that she might be a future master, she still looks younger than he is. The girl asks him to answer her question first since his cultivation is only at the first stage, making it impossible to ascend the Jade Heaven Stairway. And even if he could climb it, it would be even more impossible to pass the Calamity Annihilation formation made by her elder sister. The protagonist sits up and asks if she did not just see it with her own eyes. The system scolds him, saying that he must speak cautiously, otherwise he will be punished by the heavens and die instantly. The girl remains confused, thinking that this might be because the stairway is a very ancient structure and perhaps is in poor condition. Xiachi simply continues laughing. The girl stands up, saying that she will inform her 3 sisters, and that in the meantime, he must stay there and not move. But he is surprised when he notices the tight clothes the young girl is wearing. She begins to release her power and quickly disappears. While waiting, he starts to wonder what he should say if the 4 masters continue insisting on finding out how he managed to break the seal. The system tells him to look to the side. That is the immortal condensing pool, an ancient divine spring, condensed from the essence of the cold moon. It takes 10 years to form a single drop. It can consolidate essence and protect the spirit with pulsing spiritual energy. Xiachi already imagines what he has to do. He tears off his clothes and jumps into the pool, rapidly beginning to rise in stages. Meanwhile, Julie is already in the palace and her master asks whether she has met the new disciple yet. She says that she has seen him and that even though he is handsome, there is a catch. The master asks what catch that is. Another master finds it strange, since Julie usually speaks very directly and is now stuttering. Julie explains that the boy is a bit strange, since he is only an outer disciple at the first stage of Ling Shui. Yet, he still managed to climb the stairway and break the seal. She asks whether that is really possible. One of the masters is impressed and says that, in that case, the new disciple is a predestined one, chosen from among millions. She asks Julie to open her mouth and begins to bring her tail toward Julie's face, but Julie grabs the tail, saying that she suspects the protagonist cheated, or that the Calamity Annihilation Array is old and damaged. Another master says it is impossible for the Calamity Annihilation Array to be flawed, but Julie insists, saying she only wants to express just how absurd that boy is. However, the others continue saying that he passed the assessment, so he is their disciple, and that they cannot wait to meet the new disciple. Sometime later, Julie returns to where she had found the protagonist, but he is no longer there. She starts looking around since she had told him not to run off. Suddenly, he emerges from the water, making Julie curious. Xiachi smiles, saying that she finally came back and that, moreover, the other two masters have also arrived. Julie remains furious, asking how he dared to bathe in the immortal condensing pool. He notices that she is angry and apparently has an unstable temper, but he comes up with a good idea. He starts drying himself and asks what the problem is with staying in the pool, since it is very clean because he bathes every day. Besides, he's not just getting wet, but actually scrubbing himself. He notifies the system that he is risking his life to enrage others, so he cannot be left hanging. Julie grows more and more irritated. Because of this, the system congratulates him, saying that he enraged the sword goddess Julie Yan Yue and gained 9,000 fury points. In addition, due to his shamefully despicable behavior, the system will also grant a divine-level cultivation method. Bare-handed disarmament can completely resist any attack. The cooldown is 7 days and the duration is 15 minutes. Xiachi becomes irritated with the rewards he received, asking whether the system is really being serious. The system says that whoever uses it will know. However, the protagonist remains disappointed, saying that the system said from the very beginning that it attracts hatred and that the reward depends on the degree of provocation. Standing before him are the 4 immortals, so he should at least obtain a more impressive cultivation method, such as an almighty push or something like that. The system reprimands him again, telling him never to underestimate the judgment of the system itself. Julie asks what he is muttering to himself and orders him to get out of the pool immediately. Xiachi shouts that he is already getting out and stands up. The masters realize that the only small thing about the protagonist is his cultivation, and that he truly is the chosen one among millions. Julie tightly covers her eyes, questioning who told him to stand up like that, and says that if he does not get dressed within half an hour, he will be punished. The protagonist continues provoking her, saying that it was she herself who told him to stand up and asking whether he is behaving well. Julie becomes even more irritated, saying that she would never have a disciple like him and, already out of patience, begins to grab her sword, gathering an enormous amount of energy, which she releases in a furious strike, even as one of the masters tries to stop her. Xiachi becomes worried when he sees the sword flying toward him, like death approaching. He remembers the ability he just received and decides to bet everything on it. Using bare-handed disarmament, the sword hits its target. Julie cannot believe what she just did. Xiachi is holding the sword with his bare hands. The system notifies that there are now 6 days, 23 hours, and 59 minutes remaining as the daily use has been consumed. Another master quickly approaches, telling Julie to step back immediately. However, they are all shocked to see that the protagonist is truly holding the sword with his hands. He tells them that it was a very close call and that the new disciple was almost cremated. Julie stands frozen, saying that it is impossible because someone at the first stage could never block her blade. The master continues scolding Julie, who finally restrains herself and lowers her head. She withdraws the sword, which pulls the protagonist forward before returning to the dimension from which it had emerged. The master is so furious that her anger points reach 100,000. She asks how Julie dared to disobey a direct order, and declares that she must return and carve the scripture of quietude 500 times as punishment. Julie, on the verge of tears, can only accept her penalty. The system appears once again, congratulating the protagonist for once more enraging the Empress Yuan Jinyao of Liu. The Empress is destined to subdue all the heavens and be invincible for eternity, and the system deems the reward epic. Qiankun Divine Body, ranked first among all divine bodies, increases comprehension by 100-fold and cultivation speed by 100-fold. According to ancient legends, those who possess the Qiankun Divine Body will eventually become co-rulers of the 3 realms. Indirect provocations also count toward the host's merit. Xiachi is stunned, asking whether this is really acceptable. Empress Jinyao announces that the protagonist has successfully reached the peak and passed the evaluation of the 9 Heavens Calamity Annihilation Array. From that moment on, he is the legitimate disciple and future sovereign of the sacred domain of Kangming, and this decision is final. They will announce it to all members of the sect on a date yet to be chosen. She tells Xiachi that he must return with them to the Divine Palace. One of the masters becomes excited, saying that he is a good disciple and that from now on his master will definitely train him well. One of them goes to Julie, saying that she has already prepared the classics Julie needs to study, but Julie keeps staring at the protagonist, asking why he is still standing there. He hurriedly finishes getting dressed and shouts to all his new masters that he is coming. At the Yunyan Pavilion, the place used to receive guests in the Divine Palace, the Empress says that before the formal disciple acceptance ceremony, Julie will teach Xiachi. Julie becomes indignant, asking why it has to be her, pointing at him and saying that Jinyao knows her very well and knows she is not good at teaching. The Empress says that precisely because of that, since they do not get along, they need to temper each other's personalities. Moreover, it has already been decided that Zhu Li will take him to familiarize himself with the Divine Palace, so she will not need to complete the task she had been assigned during these days. Zhu Li, though sulky, ultimately accepts Jinyao's decision. She stands up and calls the protagonist, saying it is time to go. He bids farewell to Jinyao and begins following Zhu Li, thinking this will be great since that girl is very fiery and easy to provoke. However, one of the masters grows worried, saying that Zhu Li is very straightforward and simple, and perhaps not the best choice to train the new disciple. The Empress replies that the Divine Palace has remained deserted for many years, so they must seize this opportunity to inject some vitality. The blue-haired master agrees, saying the idea is actually quite good. The pink-robed master says that the little disciple hides some secrets, so his future life will certainly be interesting, and she is very eager to see the outcome. Meanwhile, outside, Xiachi asks who built the Divine Palace, when she became one of the 4 immortals, and whether it is possible that the second master is really a fox. He also asks why she is not answering any of his questions. Zhu Li merely replies that she does not know and takes a deep breath because he is extremely annoying. She begins introducing the place and says that this is the Changyun Pavilion, where books are stored. The protagonist looks at the pavilion with interest, since he has already read almost all the books in the outer sect's scripture pavilion, and perhaps this is a good time to look at new classics. He asks whether he can go in to take a look, but she refuses, saying that they must first finish touring the place since she still has homework to do and no time to waste on him. In another area, she shows him the Joxiao Hall, designated for meditation, followed by the Yuyang Pavilion, which is the eldest sister's private residence. For a moment, he realizes his thoughts have wandered. Zhu Li, still doubting the protagonist, points out that her sisters believe he is a predestined child, but she truly does not believe that. The system warns that it is always watching, so he cannot say anything foolish. He tries to change the subject, asking whether the main objective is not to tour the Divine Palace. Zhu Li answers yes, but says she only shows places to true direct disciples, and that if the protagonist used despicable methods to pass the evaluation, he will face severe consequences. She asks whether someone at the first stage of Ling Shui could possibly withstand one of her attacks, since she is already in the spiritual refinement realm, 6 realms and 54 stages above the protagonist, so she is not a fool. Xiachi simply smiles and says that he truly is a child of destiny. However, he realizes that the girl is suspicious of his bare-handed disarmament, but she has no proof. Zhu Li asks if he is serious, and even without knowing what she is planning, he answers yes. The girl starts walking, saying that they have plenty of time to verify it because she is genuinely curious to see how long the good fortune of this so-called predestined child will last. Xiachi says that if girls get irritated too often, they end up entering menopause earlier than normal, but Zhu Li asks what menopause is. He begins to explain that it is a terminal disease, and those who suffer from it often show repressed emotions, growing anger, insomnia, acne outbreaks on the face, and even baldness. And worst of all, people can start growing beards and develop flat chests. He adds that hers is already not very big, and combined with her temper, it might be very difficult for her to get married. Zhu Li becomes completely furious again, gaining 5,000 rage points. She grips her sword and tells him that the day she shrinks will be the same day he shrinks as well. Xiachi gets worried and tells her not to forget what the Empress instructed, because she needs to be careful not to anger her again. Zhu Li tries to restrain her rage, saying that this is very good, since he learned very quickly how to use the elder sister's name to pressure her. He smiles and says that he learned everything that is useful. However, he realizes that this crazy girl cares a lot about breast size, gaining another 5,000 rage points. She does not seem too worried about the threat, which shows that she is the type of person who cares more about physical form. Now that he has this information, he gets a great idea. He calls out to her and says that it is not a problem for her chest to be small since it matches her flat butt. This time, she becomes so enraged that the rage points jump to 10,000. She starts grabbing her ruler, saying that she will use ruler amplification and make it even bigger. With a shout, she declares that no one in this world will be able to save him now. Seeing death approaching, he starts running, and she yells at him to stop running because he has nowhere to go. The next day, inside his room, the protagonist is sleeping when Zhu Li kicks the door open, shouting for him to wake up. Xiachi explains that doors are meant to provide privacy, and that when someone wants to enter, they knock and call out. But Zhu Li simply ignores him, since they have not even seen half of the Divine Palace yet. She tells him to get up quickly so they can continue. The protagonist starts getting dressed and runs outside, asking her to wait a moment, but he is already planning to irritate her again. He asks if she is still angry about what he said regarding her small chest. Zhu Li goes to the blue-haired master and says that she can no longer teach such a disobedient disciple. The blue-haired master tries to comfort her, saying that the protagonist is still very young and that there is no need to argue with a child. Xiachi takes advantage of the situation and says that this is all true since he is still a child, so how can she bully a poor child? However, Julie does not consider him a child and says that he just needs to wait and see what lies ahead. The blue-haired master tries to calm her, saying that cultivators should avoid impatience, and asks her to remember what the elder sister said yesterday. She also tells the protagonist that he is a good disciple and must remember never to disrespect his master, asking if he understands. Xiachi pretends to be innocent as if he understood nothing at all. The third master pats him on the shoulder and says that it seems they still have not finished the tour, and if that is the case, she will personally show him the way. The three begin walking together, and once again the protagonist starts provoking her, saying that Julie should learn a bit more from the third master since she really seems like a proper master. The third master laughs and says that this is quite a coincidence, because she is his master now and forever, and she would also like to give him a piece of advice. He should provoke the third sister a little less. As for the reason, she remains silent. Xiachi becomes curious and asks what the reason is, urging her to say it quickly. Julie decides not to tell him, saying that she will leave him so angry that he will explode. The system notifies that the host has become irritated for the first time, and since this is the first occurrence, he will be exempt from any punishment. But from now on, the host must be careful, because becoming irritated will result in affinity deductions. He does not agree, asking whether this is some kind of auxiliary function meant to improve cultivation. Shortly afterward, the third master says they should stop the visit for the day because she is very hungry. Xiachi notices a place called the Fireworks Garden and, out of curiosity, asks the third master whether that is where fireworks are made. However, she explains that it is a place where they can feel alive. Julie runs over there since apparently he still has not realized what it truly is. The protagonist asks what he was supposed to notice when opening the door, and the fourth master explains that it is an examination. Xiachi remains confused, not understanding what kind of test it really is. His master explains that it is about cooking. Xiachi asks whether immortals really need to eat after reaching grain abstinence. They explain that they do not need to, but they enjoy feeling the warmth of life. Julie smiles because, with the protagonist's current cultivation level and lifespan, it is difficult to explain. The third master explains that Jinyao likes braised chicken with white mushrooms. The second master likes boiled chicken with potatoes. She herself likes salt-roasted chicken, and the fourth master likes chicken as well, her mouth already watering. Julie says that the third master used to cook, but now she needs to focus on breaking through her own realm, so this task will belong to the protagonist from that day onward. Xiachi is a little stunned and asks whether they really like chicken that much. Julie grabs a chicken and hands it to him, telling him to stop pretending not to understand because it is already time for the meal. Xiachi looks at the chicken and smiles, because he is very good at this. The third master says she is looking forward to it and hopes he really is good. Julie, also expectant, says that if it is not delicious, she will deal with him later. Xiachi laughs and says that if they want food, then he will give them food. Before killing the chicken, he bids it farewell, saying that if it dies earlier, it will reincarnate earlier, so he wishes it a swift liberation from the beast realm. He picks up the cleavers and begins to focus on cooking the chicken. With astonishing ease, he starts preparing the food as if he were dancing through the space. In just a few minutes, he goes to the table and says that dinner is served. As he sets the table, the masters simply watch the confidence he radiates. He lifts the lids from the pots and asks his masters to taste the meal. A brilliant light bursts out from inside the pots, shocking all four of them. The dishes are completely perfect and beautiful. The second master asks what that light was that came out of the food, but the protagonist merely asks them to taste it. The Empress, being the eldest, says that it is time to begin eating. The four prepare themselves, and each takes a bite of the food. All of them are astonished, and the Empress says that it is not bad at all, as it has a flavor she has not tasted for many years. The second master is enchanted, as the food feels like a blazing fire, an intense sensation flooding her body like the rebirth of a phoenix. The third master, also impressed, says that with every bite, the spiritual energy within her stirs unconsciously, like the feeling of breaking through a spiritual barrier. Even the jar of anger calms down, because now she understands that this is something that brings infinite happiness. The Empress asks where he learned to make those 4 dishes. He thinks that to bring out the perfect umami flavor of the chicken, he had to delicately stimulate the meat's natural sweetness. And with the addition of seasonings and other ingredients, the chicken still managed to retain its original flavor without being overwhelmed by the sauce. But he chooses to keep this secret and says that it is simply love. The second master goes over to him, calling him little disciple, and says that she is very happy. Xiachi asks Julie whether he is qualified now, but she merely tells him to sit down and eat, and after finishing, return to his room and cultivate diligently. Sometime later, already inside his room, he stares at the system while thinking that, based on the information he has, provoking others grants points. But he himself cannot be provoked because if that happens, he will lose a large amount of fury points. However, he cannot understand the logic behind this or the true purpose of the system, and it is possible that it is trying to make him detach from desires and material possessions. While examining the system's functions, he notices that some are still unavailable and decides to ask the system which functions are currently active. The system says that the basic functions already allow him to unlock the shop. Xiachi becomes excited and asks what kind of city he will be able to buy. The system asks the host what he would like to do. He says that he needs to be able to attack from a distance of 7 steps, and do so even faster, and also be able to act within 7 steps. But he's very curious to know whether technology is stronger than immortal techniques, so he asks the system to tell him whether such a thing exists or not. The system replies that it does, because exchanging for corresponding items consumes equivalent points. For example, a large-scale weapon of mass destruction, like an atomic bomb, could require an astronomical amount of points. Xiachi asks which is more powerful, an atomic bomb or the Elder Master, but even the system cannot answer, as it lacks sufficient data for such a comparison. Jin Yao suddenly appears and says that she is an atomic bomb. The protagonist is startled and asks what she said, but the first master simply changes the subject. He remains uneasy, wondering if he is overthinking things and whether perhaps she is as well. Jin Yao holds a talisman in her hand and says that she originally planned to give him the illusion song talisman before the meal, but ended up being interrupted by the delicious food. That talisman is proof that he has become one of the 4 direct disciples and can protect him at critical moments. Xiachi lets out a sigh of relief, realizing that he must indeed have been thinking too much since there was no way that could really be possible. He takes the talisman and thanks her for the gift. Jin Yao adds that an atomic bomb is not as powerful as she is, and that if he wishes, she will let him experience it someday, so he needs to work hard. Xiachi feels a little confused, but the first master simply tells him to rest well, because there must be many things he still wants to know, while she still needs to meditate. The Empress then teleports away, leaving the protagonist alone. He thinks about her words, about an atomic bomb not being as powerful as her, and that he could experience it someday, clearly feeling that there is more to that statement than meets the eye, and perhaps she does not even know what an atomic bomb truly is. The next day, in front of the pavilion of starry clouds, Xiachi was wondering what the name of the library they had mentioned the day before was. This was all Julie's fault, since she had not been a very good guide. On the other hand, she was chatting with the third master, saying that she had thought of a few things to say that would make the protagonist explode with anger. The third master said that she might fail before even starting, and suggested that the two of them have some tea to calm their minds. Xiachi began to open the door since it had been a long time since he wanted to see the Divine Palace's library, but as soon as he opened it, he was surprised when something appeared in front of him, grabbed him, and pulled him inside. The second master asked if he needed anything from her. The protagonist pretended to be surprised, and she noticed from his tone of voice that he seemed a little disappointed. Xiachi tried to explain, saying that it was not quite like that, since he had only wanted to find some cultivation techniques in the library to study, and because he was not yet familiar with all the paths, he ended up getting confused and arriving there. Besides, that place was very pleasant, and was included in his sightseeing route. The second master began to approach, asking if he really liked learning that much. The protagonist smiled and said yes, but he had a bad feeling that something was about to happen. Getting even closer, she asked why he was dodging, and whether it was because she was so ugly that she had scared him. Xiachi began to praise her, saying how beautiful she was, that a single glance would be enough to conquer cities, and that with a second glance she could conquer nations. Her tail began to appear, and the protagonist was surprised, asking if that was how she appeared because it was very cute. The second master said that when she was in a good mood, her tail ended up appearing, and she had not expected her little disciple to be so eloquent. Making a proposal, she asked whether he would like to praise her a bit more, and if he managed to make her happily reveal her 9 tails, he would be rewarded with some treasures. This proposal sparked the protagonist's curiosity, and he asked what those treasures would be. Showing the elixirs in the cabinet, she explained that all of them had been refined by her personally. Some could strengthen essence, while others nourished the spirit, not to mention that some could prolong life and even help in breaking through barriers. In any case, whatever he wanted, his master would provide it. Xiachi prepared himself, saying that he would try it without any shame and would start with a poem. He stood up using all of his captivating beauty and began to recite, "Like garments, like a face of flowers, in the spring breeze, on the threshold of the door blooming with grace. If not fresh, on the mountaintop, we shall meet beneath the terrace." The second master's face turned rosy and her eyes sparkled and the tails began to appear. The protagonist was surprised to see that the poem worked. Moved, she said that the poem really was beautiful. Xiachi knelt down, holding her hand, and with a steady gaze emphasized that the poem might be beautiful, but it could not compare to the beauty of a goddess like her. With a smile on her face, she called him a brat and asked whether he really wanted to provoke his master. With one of her tails, she grabbed him. The protagonist was startled and questioned what she was doing. With a suspicious look, the master said that he had been flattering too much and therefore needed to be taught a good lesson so that he would learn to respect his master. Xiachi asked her to give the reward first and then teach him, because that way he would learn with more enthusiasm. She agreed and simply withdrew the tail and the embrace, saying that she would reward him first. Then she began to ask which one he wanted, saying it could be the purple bottle since any of them would do. He thanked his master for her kindness. However, she grew curious about why he wanted to learn the conversion technique, since he could learn illusion techniques from his master. The illusion techniques of the nine-tailed fox were interesting, which made him excited and eager to learn, thinking that even if he did not learn everything, he might even learn while sleeping. A short while later, Julie looked at that situation and asked the second master what she was doing. Xiachi was sleeping while rolling around on the floor, calling out the second master's name. Julie continued to question why the protagonist seemed so dazed and whether she had used some illusion technique on him. The second master merely smiled and said she did not know, but soon after revealed that she was teaching cultivation techniques and asked whether Julie wanted to join. Julie says there is no need because if she mixes the trainings, the protagonist might suffer an IQ deviation. Besides, the Empress told her that the protagonist was at the Starry Cloud Pavilion and asked her to show him the place. With no patience to wait for him to wake up, she calls him affectionately, with all the care in the world. Xiachi gets up saying that apparently his kidney has switched places with his heart from the force of the kick. Moreover, the spiritual power was very strong, and he ended up falling into the second master's trap, which was a shame since he did not get to see how the story unfolded. Everyone falls silent for a moment, and the system appears to him saying that descendants of the Yuhu clan possess illusion techniques considered the best among the three great clans. Julie, curious, asks what he saw in the illusion just now, but the protagonist says it was nothing since they interrupted his moment. Respectfully, he asks the second master to teach him illusion techniques another day. She emphasizes that she will give her all to teach him, and the protagonist is surprised, thanking her once more before taking his leave. As he walks out, he remembers that she had told him to feel free to choose any red bottle. However, he should not touch the purple bottles. He grows curious about what kind of elixir is inside those purple bottles and looks at the Starry Cloud Pavilion, thinking that he feels a bit of regret. Julie shouts at him not to dwell on the past because they need to go. As they walk through the place, Julie praises him, saying that the chicken he prepared the day before was very good. The protagonist is surprised, thinking she is trying to please him, but his master denies it, saying it is true, and that she simply decided not to bother with him anymore. Xiachi falls silent, looking at her. Julie becomes a little uncomfortable and asks why he is standing there staring. He thinks that he can hardly wait to get back at her and, with a smile on his face, says that it is nothing. However, he realizes that there is something strange about her behavior and that she's probably planning some kind of trap. He asked her to show the way as he would like to visit the library. Julie notices that he is acting strangely and questions whether he is planning something bad. Xiachi keeps thinking that even if she wants to ambush him, it will not work, because he will leave her sitting until her legs go numb. In a friendly and polite manner, he says that the disciple only wants to find the library as quickly as possible, and once again asked her to show the way since she had said she would guide him. Just this calmness is enough to irritate her. Julie steps in front of him, shouting that this is stupidity because she already showed him everything the day before. And if he can barely remember such things, then how will he learn from them in the future? Xiachi apologizes, saying that he is a somewhat clumsy disciple, and asks her to have a little more patience with him. He thinks that there are no fixed strategies in war nor permanent forms in water, and that, like a wild king, it is easy for him to control her. A short while later, they arrive at the entrance of the library. His master says that this is the Divine Palace's library, but needs to warn him that everything he managed to understand in the outer sect may not be comprehensible here. Trying to irritate him, she says that this is because some people are only in the blood condensation realm. However, the protagonist remains calm, saying that a clumsy bird still needs to fly. Julie starts trembling with anger once again, seeing that everything she does fails. Xiachi opens the library door and hears a noise, which shows that it needs lubrication. The two of them are surprised to see that the third master is already inside, sitting and reading a book with great inner peace. They approach, and the protagonist greets her, saying that it is very pleasant to have her around, but he is completely ignored and sighs in sadness. Julie laughs and explains that he does not need to be upset, since the third master does not pay attention to people when she is focused. She asks him to follow her and says that even though she does not frequent that place often, she still knows it very well. Xiachi asks if she is serious because he does not believe it. Even so, the two of them start walking. A few minutes later, Julie shouts that she finally found it because she remembered that her 9-li saber technique was on that shelf. The protagonist points out that they have already been walking for half an hour and that she only managed to find that one book, and that was after saying she knows the place well. She shouts at him, saying that he talks too much and that she is taking this first so that he can see that this is what being prepared means. Xiachi keeps laughing, saying that apparently she even knows how to use idiomatic expressions. Julie continues searching for a few things while the protagonist starts looking around and sees something fallen on the floor. When he picks up the book, he sees that it has Julie's image on it and that it is the saber technique that pierces lightning. The fourth master keeps searching because she cannot believe the book disappeared since she wrote it with such care. With tears in his eyes, the protagonist thinks that the book was just thrown on the ground and that this is pathetic. However, the third master approaches like a ghost, saying that he cannot read that book. Xiachi is startled when he sees her there, and the master apologizes, saying that she was reading and did not notice they had arrived, and that the book he is holding. Julie interrupts her, saying that she arrived at the perfect time, and asks if the third master has seen her book, because, as far as Julie remembers, it was placed on the top shelf. The third master asks if she is talking about the book called 9-li saber technique. Julie says that is exactly it, because if she is not mistaken, that is precisely the name. The third master says she does not remember anything and that perhaps someone borrowed it. The protagonist is surprised by the lie and hides the book inside his clothes. The third master asks why they are there. Julie explains that Xiachi wanted to find some books, so she brought him to the library. The system appears to him, but the third master asks what book he is looking for and whether it happens to be a scripture or a cultivation technique. Xiachi asks for some advanced cultivation techniques. The third master thinks for a moment and with her ability takes all the books around them, saying that he could read those for now. He holds the books and thanks her for the help. The third master says that if he has any difficulty, he can look for her, and he thanks her once again, saying that he will stay quiet so as not to disturb her. Julie calls him to leave, but the protagonist refuses, saying that he wants to stay there to read and that if she has something to do, she can go ahead. She simply ignores him, telling the third sister that she will take the disciple away. The master tells him to study a bit more and stop making typos. Outside, the protagonist complains, saying that Julie cannot ruin his plans just because the third master pointed out a typo. She says that he is still too young and failed to understand the third master's subtext because those words were a polite way of dismissing the two of them, and that if he stayed there any longer, he would end up being turned into an ice sculpture, and there is no point asking how she knows that. The protagonist is surprised, but thinks she is being too sensitive. Julie looks at him and says that if he does not believe her, he can just go test it personally. Being frozen by the third master is one thing, but she also tends to ignore things she considers unimportant. And since Julie will not be there to save him, he would remain frozen. Xiachi analyzes the situation and realizes that she really is not lying. Julie emphasizes that she already warned him not to provoke the third master, especially when she is focused on something. As for the typos, if he dares to spread that around, she herself will roast him until he is golden on both sides, then sprinkle cumin on him and throw him into the monster forest. He starts smiling because if she wants him to keep it a secret, she will have to pay a price. Otherwise, it would be a great tragedy if, by accident, he spread this throughout the entire sacred domain. She becomes furious again, shouting that he has just sealed his own fate and that she will do nothing to stop it. The system congratulates him, saying that he managed to irritate her repeatedly in a short period of time, earning special fury points. Now, the mission system has been activated. The first mission is to complete the inner sect evaluation. As a reward, he can choose a celestial grade cultivation technique or a treasure, but the penalty is unknown. A little confused by the information, he keeps staring at the system, wondering what this penalty is. Julie feels ignored and continues shouting, questioning whether he is dating himself again, and whether he heard the threat she just made. He remains silent, thinking that although the system sends various beginner welcome kits, it also constantly provokes the host, as if it enjoyed doing so. He remembers that when he first activated the system, he had been provoked as well. Moreover, he never received any hints about which points were needed, having to figure everything out through trial and error. Because of that, he ended up being harshly reprimanded by society when he transmigrated. He looks at his master, who ends up giving up on having a rational conversation with him, since it is the same as playing the lute to a cow. Xiachi thinks again that he needs to find a way to participate in the inner sect evaluation, because he fears that the system might pull some trick. Julie remains intrigued and asks the protagonist why he always acts this way toward her, questioning whether he suddenly realized that she is his master. He comes back to reality and starts looking around, thinking that he has already been there for 3 days and has not seen anyone else. The fourth master asks what he is looking for, but the protagonist stays silent, thinking that if he cultivates there, it might not be very suitable for the Fury system to accumulate points and improve realms, so he needs to find a way to go down the mountain. Julie begins to lose her patience and shouts at him, asking whether he's really going to keep pretending he's not listening. He apologizes, saying that he has just realized something, and she becomes a little confused, not understanding what he means. The protagonist says that women only hinder his speed when drawing the sword, and that for some time now he has felt that the Empress's arrangement was far too perfect. Julie gets irritated extremely easily, so she ends up being like a portable charger. Once again, she feels offended and asks whether he truly thinks she is holding back his cultivation. The protagonist smiles and says that he would never dare say that, but that he simply thinks the fourth master is too much for confused adolescents. He starts celebrating when he sees that his provocation is working. Julie begins to draw her sword, saying that this is nothing but a load of nonsense and that she needs to cut him down immediately. Even with a bit of fear, the protagonist continues. He shouts that she simply does not know how to interact with men, gets shy over anything, and when that happens, tries to attack him to cover up her embarrassment. The system appears again, saying that he has managed to irritate Julie repeatedly, and, because of that, has received 1 level of 9 Li story. 10 levels of 9 Li story automatically enhanced his comprehension of the martial Tao, leaving him satisfied and confident that the future will be promising. He tells Julie that the Empress has a good eye for people and must have noticed that Julie was feeling turmoil in her Tao heart, which is why she asked her to take him along. Her fury keeps rising and, ready to attack, she emphasizes that since the protagonist likes cultivating so much, as his master, she will teach him the flaming sword technique. The flaming sword technique is Julie's first technique of the 9 Heavens Li fire. She begins to attack, but at the last second, the protagonist shouts and proposes a bet. She stops her attack and asks what kind of bet he wants to make. Xiachi takes a deep breath and says that he wants to participate in the inner sect evaluation that will take place in 1 month and that the bet will be whether he passes or not. He thinks that there are many targets for hours at the foot of the mountain, which will make his harvest easier. Julie asks whether he knows that to become an inner disciple, it is necessary to at least reach the Yuan Hai realm, and that even after secretly using the mortal condensation pool to reach the 7th stage of blood condensation, it still took the Empress 3 months to reach that level. Therefore, he is not only aiming too high but also acting foolish. Xiachi looks at her and with a smile on his face says that it seems she is afraid to bet with him. Julie starts laughing, asking why she would be afraid of such a certain victory, but says she would like to know the terms of the bet and that if she does not like them, she will continue teaching saber techniques. The protagonist says that if he fails the inner sect evaluation, he will leave the sacred domain on his own. She is surprised and says that becoming a disciple of the 4 immortals is the desire of everyone in the sacred domain, asking whether he really thought it through. Without hesitation, the protagonist says yes. Julie sees that he is confident and does not stop him from trying, but asks what will happen if he passes the evaluation. Even though she is certain that he will fail, she starts wondering where that brat gets so much confidence. Xiachi steps closer and says that if he wins, she will have to marry him and become his wife. Julie asks if he has gone mad, but the protagonist keeps provoking her, asking whether she is afraid. Julie stares at him, thinking that maybe he injured his brain when he broke the annihilation formation. But since she is certain that he will fail, given that the evaluation starts in a month and he will not even be able to reach the minimum requirement to register, she decides to accept the bet. Xiachi takes advantage of this and says that he has just one more small matter to discuss with her. Julie asks what he wants, and the protagonist asks whether he needs to descend the celestial jade steps if he wants to go down the mountain. She pretends to be difficult, asking whether that is asking too much, because she believes the celestial steps are not something a person can climb or descend whenever they want, since reaching that place must have cost the protagonist a great deal of spiritual energy. He keeps insisting, asking her to send him away, but she refuses, saying that she does not have time. Xiachi continues provoking her, claiming that if she does not help him descend, he will start kissing his future wife. That is enough to make her lose control, and she kicks him away. He begins to descend, even though he did not want to do it at that moment. But now there is no turning back. He falls from the mountain peak like a shooting star. People are shocked and ask one another whether some palm technique has appeared, or if perhaps it is a long-lost technique. Xiachi realizes that he has no control over where he will land and starts shouting for people to get out of the way. He He crashes heavily into the ground but gets up, complaining that the fourth master is far too cruel since his entire body is aching. Yuanxing walks up to him, saying that it seems the trash has returned, trying to humiliate him, and asks how the protagonist was defeated, questioning whether he failed to climb the celestial steps and break the annihilation formation. Xiachi asks why they have to make everything difficult every single time, since they used to band together to mock him every day. But now Yuanxing acts sarcastically, perhaps because he can barely climb 30 steps. They start getting irritated, and Yuanxing asks how someone who was expelled from the Divine Palace by the Four Immortals dares to keep barking there. Xiachi explains that him being expelled while Yuanxing cannot climb are two different matters, and this is exactly what the protagonist wants, because it is better for everyone to think that he was expelled. He continues provoking, saying that Yuanxing should use all this free time to focus on the inner sect evaluation, but with his current cultivation level, he probably will not even be able to register. The system notifies him that the rage points have accumulated to a total of 100,000, and that the system shop has been unlocked. Xiachi asks the system whether it has happiness soda for fat people, because he wants a bottle. He prepares to start shopping, but Yuanxing pulls him back, asking who gave him permission to leave. This causes the protagonist, unintentionally, to press something on the system, which informs him that he has purchased a happiness soda for fat people. The soda appears in his hand, but the protagonist becomes completely irritated when he sees that this happiness costs 50,000 points. The system emphasizes that exchanging items for things outside the current game system requires a large amount of points. Xiachi becomes even more irritated because the system had not provided this information beforehand. He slaps Yuanxing's hand away and starts cursing at him, telling him to get out of the way, because he is already extremely annoyed since the soda, besides being absurdly expensive, contains only 200 milliliters. Yuanxing becomes furious, saying that no one dares to act tough in front of him, because if he does not teach a lesson to those who do, how will he maintain his status in the future? He attacks the protagonist with full force, but Xiachi catches the punch with one hand and stares at him deeply as if he wants to kill him. Xiachi takes a sip of his soda and says that it really is delicious, but that it does not matter, because someone he does not know and has already forgotten once said that everything that is lost must be taken back. He begins to release his aura, frightening Yuanxing, who asks how that is possible since before the protagonist climbed the celestial steps, he was a nobody, and now he is at the 7th stage of blood condensation. Xiachi simply starts laughing. Other people approach, asking what is happening there, saying that this must have been the work of the Four Immortals who granted cultivation to the protagonist, but with only the 7th level as a reward, he is still a nobody and was nevertheless demoted. Yuanxing starts laughing, saying that now he understands everything, and that this must have been nothing more than compensation from the Four Immortals for pushing the protagonist down the mountain, since they do not want someone like him, a nobody who merely had a stroke of luck without any talent at all. Yuanxing keeps thinking that the protagonist must have been extremely lucky, and although his cultivation is not as high as Xiachi's, he is still the young master of the Celestial Saber Alliance. The Celestial Saber Alliance has stood out among the many sects for 100 years thanks to a secret medicine that can temporarily increase one's cultivation level by 3 stages, and with that he is certain he can make the protagonist kneel and beg for mercy. Xiachi keeps laughing, saying that he does not care whether Yuanxing is from the Celestial Dao Alliance or the Axe Gang, he just needs to stop this nonsense. The protagonist braces himself, thinking that maybe that idiot will not be able to withstand his next move. Yuanxing remains confident, takes a vial from inside his clothes and pours its contents into his mouth. His muscles begin to swell, tearing his clothes apart, and energy radiates from his body. Xiachi asks where the referee is, because he wants to report someone for cheating in the match. The protagonist feels somewhat offended seeing his opponent suddenly 2 levels above him through cheating, something utterly despicable. Yuanxing simply starts advancing toward him, saying that now he will be killed. Xiachi focuses, saying that there's still a long road ahead. Yuanxing keeps charging, and the protagonist realizes that this guy will not stop until he runs him over. The system asks whether he would like to buy 15 seconds of invincibility for 5,000 fury points, saying it is a great deal. Xiachi asks the system whether it is really trying to take advantage of the situation, but the system scolds him and tells him to speak cautiously. Yuanxing grows even more enraged, asking how Trash dares to get distracted in the middle of a fight and declaring that now he will be crushed like minced meat. The protagonist shouts for the system to redeem, begins his beautiful transformation like a princess, and activates the golden body. Yuanxing continues attacking with all his fury, but Xiachi remains motionless, saying he would like to see whether the attack will at least tickle him. However, something suddenly happens, stopping their fight. The second master appears, stepping on the protagonist's shoulder. She points out that the laws of the sacred domain forbid attacking brothers of the same sect and that apparently everyone has completely forgotten this rule. Xiachi looks up enjoying a privileged view but then starts crying when he realizes he wasted 5,000 points for nothing. She walks over to Yuanxing saying that within the sacred domain the Celestial Saber Alliance will not go very far and that now he will receive a small punishment. He is slammed into the ground and falls into a portal that makes him disappear. Xiachi is impressed, and the second master asks whether he truly is not afraid of being beaten to death. The protagonist explains that he is currently playing the role of a fallen outer disciple expelled from the Divine Palace by the Four Immortals, and that if she keeps acting like this, she will ruin everything. The two of them start coordinating the act, and she pushes him and throws herself onto the ground, saying that her heart is deeply sorrowful. The protagonist did not expect her to get into character so quickly. All the other sect members explode with rage, questioning how he dares to do such a thing to the goddess Miyu. She had just saved him, and this is how he repays her. Xiachi thinks that although the effect was achieved, maybe she went a bit too far. Miyu starts smiling and asks how her acting was. The protagonist replies that he is merely the background for the character she is playing. The second master says that she can be charming or sweet and asks him to give more instructions on what she should do. Xiachi takes a deep breath and says that it is enough. The second master asks if he is sure, and he extends his hand saying that now he can handle the rest by himself. Miyu keeps acting, asking for help to get up, but as soon as she stands, she throws herself forcefully against his chest. The protagonist is startled and asks what is wrong. The disciples grow even more agitated, and she boldly says that the master has not had enough fun yet. Suddenly, she runs off screaming that she no longer wants to live. The people can barely restrain themselves, and a rebellion begins, with everyone shouting that they will avenge the goddess Miyu. With no other options, the protagonist starts running. The second master keeps smiling because if they are really going to play, then they must go all out. Sometime later, amid the mountains, people were still running around trying to find the protagonist. He had hidden behind a rock, thinking that the leaf system will only create more enemies for him. Now he needs to carefully manage all his points and enhance the abilities provided by the system in order to move forward. Otherwise, he will end up being ground to death by that crowd. He looks around, sees a waterfall, and starts wondering where he has ended up. Since he had never seen that place before, he began to explore the forest. He soon realized that this was the bioluminescent pool behind the outer sect's scripture pavilion. However, he had no idea how he had managed to get there. He remembered Julie saying that this pool was a forbidden area within the sacred domain. Except under special circumstances, disciples were not allowed to set foot there on ordinary days. Looking more carefully, he noticed that someone was bathing beneath the waterfall, but when he realized who it was, he was shocked. The third master was bathing. When she emerged from the water, she noticed he was there and ordered him to approach. Xiachi stepped out from behind the trees and knelt before her. The third master asked why he was there. The protagonist tried to explain, saying that he had no intention of trespassing, much less spying on her. He thought that the reason he had ended up there should fall on the second master's shoulders, although he did not know why the third master was in that place either. She explained that this was her place of meditation and that intruders would be punished. Xiachi kept his head lowered and said that it was very cold, asking her to put on some clothes. She reflected on it for a moment and said that his punishment would be to help her put on her clothes. She picked up the garments from the other side and tossed them into his hands, ordering him to dress her. Xiachi held the clothes and began to help her. Suddenly, the third master turned around, revealing certain things, and it seemed that the protagonist was extremely unlucky to receive a punishment as severe as this. He continued dressing her until he finished. The third master looked at him and said that Julie had mentioned he was thinking about participating in the inner sect evaluation next month. With a pitiful expression, after enduring a torment no one would wish to face, he replied that it was true. The third master was confused, saying that he was already a direct disciple of the Four Immortals, so why would he want to go through such trouble? Xiachi began to explain, saying that he did not like being questioned, because even outer disciples thought he was not qualified to be a disciple of the Four Immortals, though he knew his true motivation could not be revealed. She turned around and continued staring at him with an unwavering gaze. Xiachi felt chills because her eyes seemed to pierce straight through him. She said that she understood everything and that he could leave now, as she would help keep secret the fact that he had invaded the forbidden area. He let out a deep breath because she believed his story and thanked her once again, saying that the disciple would take his leave. The system congratulated him once more for achieving the incredible feat of irritating 1,000 outer disciples in a single day. Even he could hardly believe he had angered so many people. The system said that the travel function would be unlocked soon, and that the specific travel time would be determined by the system itself. With this, he would be able to acquire items and abilities from other worlds. A few seconds later, the progress bar reached 100%. The reward was so good that Jiachi was surprised, saying that now he could trust the system. Yuanxing, who had received the punishment, was teleported into the sky in the middle of nowhere and fell into a mountain. Completely humiliated, he told the protagonist to wait just a little longer because one of the two would die. In the spiritual cultivation hall, a formation specifically created by Empress Jinyao for cultivating disciples of the sacred domain, the protagonist stood in the middle of the line, thinking that for every floor added to the hall, the spiritual pressure endured during cultivation increased tenfold. In other words, the spiritual pressure on the 18th underground floor was an astonishing 180 times greater than normal. Old Zhang Tilin was the deacon of the spiritual cultivation hall. He asked the next person to step forward and Jiachi presented himself. Tilin asked him to state his name, realm, level, and duration. The protagonist felt a bit embarrassed, thinking that this way the old man would publicly expose others, but replied that his name was Jiachi and that he was currently at the 7th stage of blood condensation, 5.5 inches, which was equivalent to about 18 centimeters. Tilin asked whether he meant 5.5 feet. The protagonist was confused, thinking that if he really wanted to ask about height, he should simply ask about height and not mention length. Tilin said that for the 7th stage of blood condensation, he needed to go to the 2nd floor and that if he could not endure it, it would be best to give up immediately and not push himself too hard because otherwise he would, at best, be crippled, or at worst, explode. However, the protagonist feels a little worried and asks whether the 2nd floor will not be too easy, since he has the inner sect evaluation the following month and needs to reach at least the Yuanhai realm. The old man explains that Zhang Zonglin, the genius who took 1st place in last year's inner sect evaluation, only dared to challenge up to the 3rd floor. On the other hand, the protagonist is not exactly young and is only at the 7th stage of blood condensation, so there is no need to throw his life away trying to improve his realm. The people behind him comment that even though he was banished by the 4 immortals, he does not need to seek death, because it is better to live a miserable life than to die. However, all of this is his own fault for challenging the celestial stairway. Now he cannot retreat, and being expelled from the sacred domain means having his life ruined. Jiachi thinks that Yuanxing's 3 lackeys perfectly inherited their master's genetic traits. Li San calls out to the protagonist, saying that with the cultivation he obtained thanks to the 4 immortals' mercy, he cannot even pass the 1st floor, so going up to the 2nd is already more than his credibility can handle. Wangxi says that the kid was always a waste and probably does not even understand the importance of body refinement and will die before being able to use that cultivation. Zhang Shuai, looking at himself in the mirror and imagining how handsome he is, tells everyone to talk less because the protagonist is different from them since they climbed up by themselves step by step. But Jiachi does not let it slide and says that they really are incredible because they have been climbing for so many years and are still stuck at the initial stage of blood condensation. On top of that, Shuai should stop staring at the mirror since his butt is growing all the way to his chin and will end up scaring people. Jiachi thinks that those people are practically offering themselves up for him to provoke, so he will not hold back. The 3 fall silent staring at him. He does not retreat and asks what happened and whether they have already run out of words. But that expression is exactly what he wants, because only when they get angry can he accumulate points. Shuai starts smiling and says that the kid cannot argue with them and is therefore stooping to personal attacks, but they will not lower themselves to that level. Wangxi tells Jiachi that he understands nothing about aesthetics, because Shuai's appearance is considered sexy. This answer shocks the protagonist when he realizes that those people are not angry, and it seems he can no longer harvest those garlics per ounce, because after just 1 day they have already become immune. The system notifies that the planar displacement function has been activated and that the planar travel function is also active. Jiachi asks what is going on. The system informs him that the host will be teleported to Drum Mountain shortly. He begins to be teleported, even while complaining that it was too fast, and thinks that this mountain is probably the mountain of the 18 dragon tribes. The system reports that the teleportation is complete, and in the middle of nowhere, the protagonist wakes up. This is Dragon Tribe 18, and he is the future master of Lingju Palace. Shuju, the soul replacement, has been successfully completed, and the memories of the original host have been synchronized with him. The objective of this traversal is to accumulate 5,000 fury points. The original host accidentally solved a chess puzzle and is about to inherit the Northern Profound Divine Art. However, he encounters a small problem. Jiachi stands up in surprise because if he manages to inherit the Northern Profound Divine Art, he will be able to withstand the spiritual pressure of the 18th level of the Spiritual Cultivation Hall. He hears a noise and when he looks back sees his beloved master. He jumps up and introduces himself as Juju, an obedient disciple. His master says that he is so ugly that it gave him a big scare. The master asks whether it was he who solved the chess puzzle and remarks that apparently he has some ability despite being ugly. However, he does not know whether the ugliness will affect the efficiency of the northern profound divine art. Juju starts complaining, saying that the master is an idiot for breaking a good leg, since that is completely immoral. But the master asks the reason for all this, since he is about to transmit the northern profound divine art and cannot even comment on the successor's ugliness after having already expressed his admiration. Master Wu Yazi, known as the universally acknowledged visualist of the 18 dragon tribes, still cannot believe why the protagonist is so ugly. The Saitama of cheap beer asks his master why he is sighing, saying that he only wanted to hear about him and his reputation. But now, seeing him in person, he realizes that the name truly reflects who he is. Yazi says that this is far too much audacity for someone without hair and asks him to elaborate on that statement. Ong from Avatar sits down on the ground since he has always been curious about what the name Wu Yaji means, and to mock him begins imitating his master. Yazi becomes furious and asks what that mosquito airport is talking about. Juju explains that he only meant that his master is so old that he helped Noah build the ark. Yazi grows even more agitated, saying that the protagonist's lack of respect is as great as his lack of hair, and that he is so ugly he looks like a thumb. This was, in fact, Juju's plan from the very beginning to accumulate rage points. He says he is ugly because the Buddha does not care about appearance. In the end, Bodhidharma shaved his head and no longer needed Piauru. His master starts shouting angrily, telling him not to say things he does not understand and to explain better what he means by those words. The protagonist tries to explain, saying he will start from the beginning. He solved the chess problem, and after that he encountered Yazi, who should pass the power on. After finishing passing on all the power, they can talk about hair and the old man drinking porridge. The protagonist thinks that everything he said is painful and that he first needs to ask about the possibility of passing on the power because if the master were to die of rage, it would be an enormous loss. The master understands the situation and shows the blue-covered book on the ground. That is his personal book, containing his experiences and reflections from the past decades, so the protagonist can read it calmly. However, it took him decades to cultivate the divine art, and for someone with the protagonist's aptitude, it would probably take around 30 years. With all that time, if he encounters something that requires the master's guidance, it might already be too late. However, if Juju admits that he is a bald, ugly idiot, then he can pass the power directly, sparing himself the trouble of using that bald head. The protagonist refuses to back down and shows 4 fingers. The master asks whether he really plans to learn it in 4 years, because even if he manages it, he might not be able to wait that long. Juju simply ignores him, perhaps having spoken too much, and picks up the book from the ground. The title is Peerless Martial Art, Rapid Cultivation Techniques of the Northern Profound Divine Art. The protagonist thinks that he has the Qiankun's sacred body, so he can learn skills 1,000 times faster than ordinary people. As he flips through the book, he begins to smile, thinking that the old man has fallen into his trap. On the other hand, Yazi also thinks that soon the Supreme Court minister will give up and bow down to beg for help. Trying to persuade him, he calls the protagonist monk and emphasizes that the people outside would be very happy to learn even a superficial part of this technique. If he explains what old man with his back to the wall drinking porridge means, admits that he is a bald, ugly idiot, and praises Yazi for being very handsome, then he will immediately pass the power to the protagonist, fulfilling the last wish of his life. Juju tells Moses to forget it because if someone tells him to go west, he will insist on going east, and besides, he is far better than the people outside. Juju emphasizes that when he showed 4 fingers, he did not mean 4 years, but 4 hours. Yazi starts laughing, asking whether he shaved off part of his brain when he removed all his hair. The protagonist tells his master that after he learns it, he will have to promise one thing. Yazi, confident, keeps laughing and says he will not promise just 1, but 10. Juju says that this is exactly what he wanted to hear and begins to release his aura. Yazi cannot believe that it is the true chi of the northern profound divine art, because something like that would not even fit in a novel. 4 hours later, Yazi notices that the protagonist is floating and shouts, asking whether no one is going to do anything about it. He starts to get worried because as the owner of the technique, he did not know that cultivating the northern profound divine art could make someone float. Suddenly, the protagonist opens his eyes and, in a superior tone, says that he has already learned everything. Moreover, he states that there were many incorrect parts in the text Yazi wrote in the book, so he corrected and optimized them. Yazi starts laughing, saying that to cultivate the northern profound divine art, one must first dissolve their internal energy. Otherwise, it will cause conflicts among the multiple techniques within the body, leading to instant madness, vomiting blood, and the collapse of all meridians. Moreover, he does not know anything about the protagonist patriarchs, but not lying is an ancestral rule. Juju looks at him and says that, it seems, he will have to demonstrate some real techniques for his master to believe him. He asks whether cultivating this art allows one to use all existing martial arts, absorb internal energy from every acupoint in the body, cultivate both yin and yang, be immune to poisons, and have true qi protecting the body. The master replies that all of that information is correct. Juju says that if that is the case, then his master can try poisoning him. That way, he will prove that he is telling the truth. Yaji points to the table, saying that if he can shatter the stone table directly, then he can make a judgment. Juju becomes excited and asks his master to watch very carefully. He focuses and strikes the stone, causing a massive explosion throughout the entire mountain. Yazi cannot believe what he is seeing. Juju apologizes, saying that he failed to properly control his strength and ended up destroying the entire cave. The master, still in shock, thinks that this truly is the technique, but he has no idea where that boy came from, and this can no longer even be described as genius, because the power of a Duzong expert is genuinely terrifying. Juju starts laughing, saying that apparently he did not lie to the old man after all. Even with some apprehension, the master says that since he promised, he will not go back on his word. The protagonist begins to smile, saying that initially one thing would have been enough, but the old man insisted on giving 9 more. Yazi starts trembling because a word once spoken is like 4 horses pulling a carriage and cannot be taken back. Juju says that out of gratitude for the old man being so straightforward, he will explain what old man with his back against the wall drinking porridge means. It means despicable, cornered with no way out, shameless, toothless, and vulgar with porridge dripping all over. Yazi becomes so furious that his fury score rises to 10,000. He points out that the protagonist is insulting him without using a single curse word, and questions how someone can be despicable, shameless, and vulgar at the same time. Juju replies that first, the old man loved Tong Piao-yun, but drove her insane. Then he fell in love with Li Chushui. Juju asks whether he still misses his little sister, since all of that was his own fault. The old man agrees, saying that he blames himself for it and that because of that incident, he locked himself inside a cave, ashamed to face anyone. The protagonist says that, first of all, he should go out and meet those 3 women separately and admit his mistakes, since he does not know how to build a harem like that. Secondly, the protagonist says that he has a good brother named Qiao Feng, a good son who was wronged by his father. When the old man goes out, he must be very careful with him, because that boy is somewhat stubborn, so Yazi needs to look after him so that he does not do anything foolish. The old man says that such insignificant details are not worth mentioning, and asks whether that boy is handsome. The protagonist almost has a heart attack from anger, but continues explaining and moves on to the third point. He says that from then on, whenever the master meets someone, he must say that Juju is the most handsome man in the world, because he is now his direct disciple. Yazi goes mad with rage again, saying that he can agree to anything except that. Juju says that he already suspected this, and that the old man cornered against the wall drinking porridge is merely confirming what he already suspected. For people of the master's age, making a bet is about integrity, not cheating. Yazi ends up agreeing, saying that the protagonist is a prejudiced bastard. Juju calls him to leave, saying that they need to go and that they can discuss the other matters while walking. Yazi says that it has been a very long time since he last left the house, and asks the protagonist to explain what the outside world is like. On the way out, Xiachi explains the current situation in detail to Yazi, revealing plot details of the next 20 episodes of the TV series. Yazi is so moved that tears stream down his face. He agrees with the protagonist's request to eradicate all scoundrels from the martial world so that justice can prevail. As soon as they arrive among the people, Su Xingwei and Chun Chu are startled. Yazi announces to everyone that the Zhenlong chess game was merely a pretext, and that Zhu Ju is the most handsome man in the world. Moreover, from that moment on, he will be his direct disciple. Taking advantage of the crowd, Xiachi worked overtime to harvest another batch of leeks. A short while later, the system appeared, congratulating him on completing the mission perfectly. The northern profound divine art would be brought back to the main world as a reward. The system informed him that he would be teleported back to the main world in 5 seconds. While waiting for the countdown, he wondered what would happen in that world after he left, since he might have rewritten the story. Brother Qiao Feng was his childhood idol, and for that reason, he would do his utmost. Back in the original world, the protagonist woke up and looked around, realizing that time apparently had not flowed in the main world. The planar travel function was simply a divine blessing for cultivation, and if he could travel through more planes, he would be able to reach the pinnacle of life. Shuai Shuai continued to look down on the protagonist, saying that as a fellow disciple, he advised him to have some self-awareness, since allowing him to cultivate on the second floor was already a sign of respect, and trying to appear richer than he really was would only lead to suffering. Xiachi asked who said he was going to the second floor because now he was going straight to the 18th. The three of them were stunned, unable to believe it. They asked if he really wanted to die, since just a few days earlier he had only been at the first stage of blood condensation. An untempered body would be crushed by the spiritual pressure the moment he entered the 18th floor. Xiachi made a proposal, saying that if he came out of the 18th floor unscathed, Shuai Shuai would be forbidden from ever looking in the mirror again, and the other two would have to spread the word throughout the sect that Shuai Shuai's butt had grown up to his chin. Shuai Shuai simply smiled and said that if the protagonist truly wanted to die, then he would not stop him, and now they just had to wait and see whether he would come out alive. Xiachi asked Tilan to register him for the 18th floor. Tilan tried to stop him, saying that he did not need to argue with fellow disciples because this was no small matter, and ruining his path of cultivation would be his fate. However, the protagonist merely asked him to register it since he had already made up his mind. Shuai Shuai kept laughing, saying that the method of suicide the protagonist had chosen was truly creative, and asked Tilan why he was trying to stop someone who was in such a hurry to die. Suddenly, someone shouted for Tilan to register him immediately. Elder Lin approached. Tilan asked what they would do if something happened. The elder explained that the path of cultivation is inherently arduous. If everyone could achieve great success so easily, cultivation would be far too simple. And since the protagonist had voluntarily chosen to challenge the 18th floor, he must have made preparations. Tilan lowered his head and agreed, making the registration. The protagonist thanked her. However, he thought that he had not expected to see the elder there since she rarely appeared except to teach classes. It was said that she was a medicine saint among the outer disciples. If something truly happened, she would not stand by doing nothing. Now everything was ready. Xiachi smiled and said he would be right back. Shuai Shuai said he would be waiting for the funeral banquet. Tilan told him to stand on the star-gathering platform. In moments, he would be teleported to the Assura hall on the 18th floor. Xiachi walked onto the platform and was transported moments later. Outside, the five of them watched through a transmission. Xiachi looked at the entrance and began to open the door. Elder Lin wondered how that boy planned to deal with spiritual pressure 180 times greater. Li San said that the kid had no idea how terrible his death would be, and that he was probably just pretending to be fine while suffering for nothing. Wangxi commented that he had heard the master of the Assura hall, Xiu Luo Lianhua, was cruel and tyrannical and did not get along with Julie. Shuai Shuai was delighted to hear that they did not get along, since the protagonist had been a disciple of the four immortals, which would make his death even more miserable. Inside the Assura hall, Xiachi began knocking on the door, but the head on it started shouting, asking where that ill-mannered brat came from and telling him to remove his filthy hands. The protagonist was startled. The other head began to laugh and asked its brother why he was scaring the child. The brother said that the child did not know the rules and therefore deserved a good lesson. Still shocked, Xiachi shouted, asking how that thing was alive. The head replied that everything there was alive and that if he did not even know that, how did he have the audacity to come there for judgment? The door started laughing, telling the old ghost that he was secretly radiant. Moreover, it has been a long time since they last saw a new face, so they decide to let him enter right away. The head on the right tells the protagonist that his little body will not withstand the young lady's approval and that if he dies there, no one will come to claim his corpse. The head on the left keeps laughing, saying that the protagonist is a handsome boy and that perhaps the young lady will like him. Xiachi remains confident, saying that he will certainly pass the trial and asks to enter. The head on the left says that it likes arrogant boys, so it ended up liking him. On the other hand, the one on the right says that people can only be bold up to a certain point and that if he truly wants to rush toward death, it will not stop him. The door begins to open, and a voice comes from inside, laughing and welcoming the guests. The protagonist starts to step in, and as he crosses the doorway, he realizes that he is in a new world. Everything around him urges him to enter quickly. Xiachi keeps looking around because that scenery has nothing to do with the name Assura. It is more like a paradise or a fairy tale world. He starts walking and notices a girl sitting under a tree. That is Asura Lianhua, the master of the Assura hall, which shocks him when he sees that she is just a little girl. Assura wakes up and notices that someone is standing in front of her. She asks if he is a challenger. The protagonist says yes and starts trying to explain, but is interrupted by attacks. He defends himself and, upon seeing the crater in front of him, realizes that the girl is not in a good mood. The master asks whether she gave him permission to take a step forward and explains that she will ask a question, he will answer, and he may only take a step when she allows it. The bears that were with her begin to say that apparently the boy does not know the rules and needs to be disciplined. She is pleased to see that her bears are trying to protect her, but soon after her mood changes again. With a serious expression, she asks which sect of the sacred realm he is a disciple of and what his cultivation level is. Xiachi replies that he is an outer disciple and that he is currently at the 7th level of blood condensation. Asura is surprised and asked whether he really is in the blood condensation realm. The protagonist points out that there is no rule preventing someone of that realm from entering the Asura hall for a trial. She says she will ask a question and that he must answer, and that if he steps out of line again, he may lose the leg with which he took his first step. She asks who his master is in the outer sect. Xiachi answers that they are the 4 immortals of Kangming. She says that now everything makes sense, because if he truly is the disciple that the 4 immortals have just accepted, it is not strange that he dares to enter the Asura hall for a test while in the blood condensation realm. In that case, she cannot go easy on him, so as not to tarnish the name of the 4 immortals. Xiachi realizes that the girl does not get along with his masters. She asks him to follow her, as the trial will officially begin. He walks to a platform and stands still at the center. Asura starts smiling, because it has been a very long time since anyone dared to challenge the Asura hall, and therefore her little bears must be feeling very lonely. Everyone agrees, saying that it is very lonely since no one ever comes there. The other things begin chatting among themselves, asking whether they remember the child who challenged them 4 years ago. She had been very close to success and was the most talented person of that century, which makes it a true pity. Asura still cannot believe that the 4 immortals prepared a trial for a mere disciple at the 7th level of blood condensation. But he seems to have some moral backbone, unlike Julie, who cries so easily. She asks him not to lose heart on the stage because there is always a chance since he is a disciple of the 4 immortals. She is eager to see the outcome. Xiachi realizes that the little girl is trying to put him in his place, but simply lets her continue however she wants. Asura says that now it is time to stop the nonsense and orders the trial to begin. Water starts flowing from the sides of the platform, creating a protective barrier. The master apologizes, but the creatures on the observation platform are all her treasures, and they cannot withstand the spiritual pressure. Therefore, he will have to endure the trial inside that water cage. Xiachi asks the system to describe in detail the situation of the trial in the Asura hall. The system begins to explain that the trial is divided into 4 stages, with the spiritual pressure multiplied by 3, 6, 12, and 18 times. Due to the restrictions of the spells of the spiritual cultivation hall, each stage of the trial must be fully completed in order for there to be any increase in cultivation level. If he gives up halfway, any physical damage will be irreversible, and he will gain nothing. Incredibly, the protagonist had not checked whether the Northern Profound Divine Art could be used for the spiritual pressure test. He asks the system if it is possible to use it, and the system says yes. The activation interval of the Northern Profound Divine Art is 2 minutes. Limited by the host cultivation level, while the Northern Profound Divine Art is active, all other system functions will enter a 1-hour cooldown period. Xiachi asks whether it is possible to cancel this waiting time and cooldown, but the system asks how that could possibly be done. He becomes completely irritated because there truly is no such thing as a free lunch. Improving cultivation must be the priority. Otherwise, if the system's functions are restricted again in the future, no one knows what he might be forced to face. Asura asks if he is ready, and with no other options, the protagonist takes a deep breath and says they can begin, because he believes that if he knows how to use his abilities and deploy them properly, everything will be fine. The master says that the first phase is called Broken Ornament Kite. The water begins to take the form of a woman and prepares to attack him. Asura merely watches while the protagonist thinks that the 7th level of blood condensation gives him an advantage in the first phase. Even with triple the spiritual pressure, it will not cause much damage. But from the 2nd stage onward, things will change. The first phase begins, and the protagonist realizes that the test has started. Tripling the pressure is still something he can endure. The system informs him that the immortal condensation pool of the Divine Hall could be an option to temper the host's body. Xiachi knows that pool belongs to Julie and that he will have to endure her complaints again, but he decides to continue. After some time, the first phase ends and Asura initiates stage 2, Light Mantle Lotus Steps. The woman-shaped energy changes again and then unleashes the full pressure onto the protagonist, forcing him to his knees. He asks whether this already represents 6 times the pressure, and the system explains that the calculation for 6 times is based on the first stage. Xiachi shouts at the system, asking why it did not say this earlier. The system mocks him, saying that he did not ask. Asura, smiling, says that if he stops now, he can still retreat safely, but if he continues like this, he will explode in less than 10 seconds. So it would be better to give up. Xiachi activates the northern profound divine art, and a divine aura begins to envelop his body, completely shattering the pressure around him. The master is surprised, as she did not expect this. Even while bleeding, the protagonist remains firm and says that he has also passed this stage. Based on the first two stages, the amplification of spiritual pressure takes effect instantly, and he would not be able to endure it for 2 minutes. The third stage represents spiritual pressure 12 times greater. Without the northern profound divine art, he would be crushed instantly. However, the divine art has already been activated once, and if he can buy time before the third stage, he will be able to pass without problems. Using the same trick before the fourth stage, however, is far too risky. Asura, serious, analyzes the situation and says that a disciple of the four immortals truly does possess some skill. Even so, she realizes that this boy is not normal and wonders whether he absorbed the spiritual energy of the water cage. Xiachi says that he underestimated the Asura Hall because he did not expect it to be so terrifying already in the second stage, and admits that he is a little scared. However, he possesses the Qiankun sacred body and already fully masters all uses of the northern profound divine art. Asura is impressed, saying that this is truly wonderful and that she is now even more eager to see his next performance. Xiachi thanks her for the praise, but his body will not stop trembling. He leans against one of the pillars and thinks that what he just absorbed was clearly not merely 9 times the accumulated spiritual pressure, but something multiplied. That means the third stage will be 12 times the base of the second stage. In the first stage, the spiritual pressure was 3 times greater. In the second, the real pressure was 18 times greater. Doing some calculations, he realizes that the real spiritual pressure of the third stage will be 216 times. He nearly collapses upon realizing this and wonders whether that place is a site of judgment or execution, because there is nothing amusing about making the act of killing look poetic. This makes him wonder that the one who nearly passed the fourth phase last time must have been someone extremely terrifying, because if even a chosen son of destiny appeared in the Asura Hall, he would be killed. Fortunately, he has these tricks. Even so, this system only gives warnings when it is already too late, and from now on he needs to be even more careful with it. Asura asks if they can already begin, but suddenly the protagonist starts to feel something. The master is startled because she has not even started the third stage yet. Xiachi says that he might have a stomachache and asks if he can go to the bathroom first. Asura gets irritated and shouts, asking what he thinks this place is and how he believes he can just do whatever he wants. Still, she ends up giving in and says that if he really needs to go to the bathroom, then he should go and come back as quickly as possible. She thinks that he already knew there would be a trial the next day and should not have eaten such bad food the night before. Xiachi keeps trembling, saying that he will have to relieve himself right there, and tells her not to worry about him. The master becomes embarrassed and says that he must choose one option, either go to the bathroom or continue the test. However, a shameless person is invincible. He chooses the trial, but without anyone noticing, he manages to stall for another half minute, because that was his original plan. Asura takes a deep breath and begins the third phase. The trial starts, and the spirits surround the protagonist, but right at the beginning of the third stage, he feels the power he absorbed using the northern profound divine art pulsing within him. Both the great dissipation demonic art and the shifting stars technique originate from the northern profound divine art. That is why, even though the text was filled with errors, Yazei is still an incomparable genius. He begins to use the techniques, saying that all rivers flow into the sea and the sea nourishes all rivers, using the same method against itself. Although it has become a yang-attributed power within the protagonist, it is still a force of the same origin. Now, he only needs to endure until the two forces merge. Asura analyzes the technique and realizes that, although it is different from what was shown in the second stage, it will not be enough, so he will not be able to endure much longer. Worried, she shouts, asking why he wants to risk his life in a trial, and emphasizes that if he says he wants to end it now, she can spare him from the pain of the spiritual pressure. However, the protagonist remains resolute and says that he can still finish. The pressure continues to be crushing and control begins to fail. His eyes turn red, and even so, he refuses to lose, asking how he could fail there. He concentrates even more, gathering all the strength that exists within his body. The ground beneath his feet begins to crack, and the energy accumulated in the palm of his hand grows larger and larger. Asura shouts for him to stop, asking if he has gone mad, because if he continues like this, he will explode and truly die. Xiachi shouts that his body is fine, but on the other hand, his hands hurt a lot. All the energy that was spreading outward begins to condense at the center of his hand, causing a massive explosion. When the glow of the explosion fades, the protagonist appears standing, without a single scratch on his body. Asura cannot believe that this is possible and asks whether he is truly human. Xiachi starts to smile because apparently she has never seen a scene like that before. He thinks that, as the saying goes, now he has a 98% chance of winning that trial. Outside, Julie had disguised herself so well that no one could recognize her. She watches the crowd from afar as they observe the protagonist's progress. They comment that they cannot believe he truly passed the third phase of the trial. Even after showing all that power, some people still criticize him, saying that it is only because his level is very low and that even with the accumulated spiritual pressure, it is not that impressive. On the other hand, others begin to defend him, asking whether they themselves would have the courage to do the same, because now, after seeing all that progress, they need to look at him with new eyes. In addition, most of those criticizing him are doing so merely out of envy, because he was accepted as a disciple of the four immortals. Shuai Shuai continues trying to humiliate him and questions whether everyone there has gone blind, because the first three phases of the trial must have been altered. He asks if they can remember the trial of the four immortals. The annihilation formation was inexplicably broken, which proves that that boy is cheating in some way. Elder Lin becomes displeased and asks whether that is really true, because if it is, then it would mean that the four immortals are a fraud. After all, a man like him managed to see where the protagonist cheated, while the four immortals did not. Shuai Shuai panics and says that he did not mean it that way. She tells everyone to be quiet and simply observe carefully how Xiachi will manage to pass the fourth stage. She feels that he chose level 18 only because he was certain he could pass, and now she has plenty of time to watch calmly. Shuai Shuai asks whether she truly believes he can pass, stressing that no one can be that lucky all the time, and that he is only there waiting to see him crushed into a paste of flesh by the 18 layers of spiritual pressure. Julie calls him out, saying that speaking ill of others behind their backs is not the behavior of a knight. Shuai Shuai replies that he is only saying what he thinks and asks what is wrong with that. She points out that bad-mouthing a disciple of the four immortals is the same as belittling the four immortals themselves. Shuai Shuai laughs and says that if the four immortals truly valued him, they would not have expelled him from the mountain. Moreover, if the four immortals really made that guy a direct disciple, then they must not be anything special. Julie says that perhaps they are simply reasonable. Shuai Shuai looks at her more closely and asks why she seems so familiar, questioning which sect she belongs to. Afraid of being discovered, Julie says that he must be confusing her with someone else and runs away. She hides behind a pillar, unable to believe that she was almost recognized even with such an elaborate disguise. She keeps peeking, wondering whether the protagonist is really going to die. She realizes she is worrying too much about him, which makes no sense, since she is there to mock her disciple. So it would be better if he failed. Someone so disrespectful toward elders, bathing wherever he pleases and acting so bizarrely is not qualified. Even as she tries to convince herself of that, she remains worried, asking herself whether he will truly die. There is no need to go that far over a bet. Suddenly, she starts to feel embarrassed and thinks that he might be doing all of this just to marry her, since he knew his current status was far too low and so he went to all this trouble. But she does not know why things turned out this way, and perhaps his brain is damaged because of something. If he truly wanted to marry her, all he had to do was ask. Even if he were rejected by one of the four immortals, that would not be something to be ashamed of. Back at the trial, the protagonist is focusing but suddenly sneezes and asks whether someone is speaking badly about him behind his back. And that single sneeze makes him shiver to the bone. Asura remarks that someone who managed to break the annihilation formation of the Nine Heavens Tribulation certainly possesses some ability to truly withstand the third stage. However, the biggest question on everyone's mind is whether this is mere luck or real skill, and the fourth stage will naturally reveal the truth. Xiachi asks whether Asura can defeat the fourth master. Asura is shocked and asks what he means by that. Outside, Julie feels a bit embarrassed, thinking that praising her in front of so many people is somewhat awkward, and even with her heart softened, she thinks that it is all a pity. While the fallen flower is willing, the flowing water is merciless, and in the end, it is impossible for anything to happen between them. Asura asks whether Xiachi is really saying that she is inferior to Julie, because that is a joke. After all, that little brat only became a disciple of the four immortals through sheer luck, so how could Julie possibly be compared to her? Xiachi smiles, because that little girl has just bitten the bait. He says that regardless of whether he manages to pass the fourth stage of the test, he has already cleared the first three parts. And if his master Julie were there, he would certainly have been annihilated with a single strike, so the question must be asked, who is more powerful between the two of them? Julie thinks that the boy is talking nonsense and that he clearly took a punch from her back then, even though she had merely been going through the motions at the time, because if she had truly struck him, he would have been completely obliterated. Still, there is no need to spread that around. Doubts continue to swirl in her mind, wondering whether the protagonist had already suspected that she might have come there to look after him, and deliberately said those words so she would hear them. With each passing second, she fell a little more in love and thought that when that boy came back, she would have to give him a good lesson so he would stop spouting that kind of nonsense everywhere. This world was blessed by waters, plants, mountains, stones, air, spiritual energy, and much more. Water, the source of life, was powerful and gentle, and the immortal spirit of water prayed for all beings. In the celestial lake of the sacred domain of Kongming, the immortal spirit of water, a child, the water-blessed baby, also won the love of all living beings. However, the child behaved differently, making the mother wonder whether she was associated with water or fire. The child kept whipping the animals while shouting to her mother, who adored that game. The mother told Lianhua that she was growing very well, and that sooner or later she would inherit her mother's position, and asked what she thought about going to see the mortal world before that. Lianhua grew excited and said it was a great idea. That child grew even more and became Asura, the master of the 18th floor, who was now completely enraged. Rage point shot past 3,000 in just a few seconds. She told the protagonist to watch what he said, questioning how he dared compare a wild, unwanted girl to her. Xiachi kept provoking, saying that whether someone is desired or not does not depend on her. And to sum it up, he was starting to think that the so-called 18-level test of the Asura Hall was just a facade. It looked terrifying, but it was simple and easy to break. He thought that now was the time to begin the harvest. Asura was so furious that the system tallied 4,990 fury points and 5,000 agility points. She shouted that everything she said was law and that water was the source of all things, and no one understood that better than she did. Xiachi asked if she was also a voyeur, since she trusted her ability to see through water so much that it bordered on obscenity. Master Asura blushed, and the protagonist smiled, saying that it seemed he had hit the mark since her face was as red as a monkey's backside. This was yet another point Asura lost, because his master Julie would not be like this. She knew how to take a joke in stride. Asura continued to lose control, asking who was spying, demanding that he be clear, and emphasizing that she could only sense things and did not want to bother with human matters. The protagonist kept laughing, saying that it was too late for her to make excuses now, and that as soon as he got out of there, he would spread her true face to everyone. The people watching thought they had never seen someone so shameless and vulgar. Shuai Shuai seized the opportunity and said that a mere cultivator of the Ling Shui realm dared insult Master Lianhua of the Hall, and that this was an affront to the immortal spirit of water and a disrespect to heaven and earth. Asura stared at the protagonist because at first she had intended to show some mercy, but now she saw it was completely unnecessary. Xiachi looked at her and said that he had not asked for mercy, since he was there to undergo the trial and not to flirt, so there should be no ambiguity. He thought his strategy was working, as only 5 seconds remained. For Asura, this was the last drop, causing her anger to overflow. The rage score reached 30,000. Trembling, she said that the 4th stage would be her special test called the Water Spirit Pavilion. The protagonist thought there were 4 seconds left, but the test began as the spirit formed. Only 3 seconds remained, the formation finished, and 2 seconds were left. The spirit charged, but the final second passed. Xiachi raised his hand and said, "Flashy." The system appeared, saying that the duration was 1 hour and 50 minutes. The bare-handed stopping technique and the northern profound divine art were active. He caught the attack with just 2 fingers, leaving everyone stunned. And when he released his strength, it caused a massive explosion that completely destroyed the water spirit. Asura could not believe what she was seeing. Even the creatures were blown backward. The system congratulated the host for reaching the 2nd level of 9 Li Yin. Energy overflowed from his body, and with a beautiful smile, he concluded the test. The people outside could not believe it. Shuai Shuai questioned what kind of cursed luck that boy had, since not only had he passed the test, he had also broken through an entire realm. Water from the explosion splashed everywhere. Asura remained in shock, unable to say a single word, wondering how such a thing was possible. Xiachi walked up to her laughing and said that this place was nothing special, that the Asura Hall was just a paper tiger. Asura's eyes filled with tears, and with a flushed face, she burst into tears. She says that he is bullying her, and she disagrees with that. Her pets try to protect her, saying that bullying girls is shameful and that he is a very bad guy for doing that. But the protagonist keeps going and says that he just passed the judgment test, so it is not a big deal. This only makes her cry even louder, shouting that this is way too much bullying. Xiachi ends up feeling bad and asks her not to cry, wondering how he even managed to bully her, but he honestly has no idea how to comfort a girl. All the disciples outside, including the elder, are irritated by his attitude, except for Julie, who says that this girl is the same as always, crying over anything, and that apparently she has no other tricks. She begins to analyze the situation and realizes that every attack the protagonist has defended so far was extremely powerful, yet he blocked them all without showing any difficulty at all. So the fact that he not only survived but truly passed the test only proves that this boy is hiding something from her. Xiachi asks whether the system mall can already be used, but the system says it is still on cooldown. However, the protagonist cuts it off, saying that he does not want to hear excuses. The system informs him that rapid transmigration has been completed and asks whether he wishes to participate in a cooperative battle. He answers yes, because if he does not console that girl soon, she is going to flood the entire Asura hall. He transforms into a ghost, muttering that being human is really difficult, so he needs to speed things up. The system announces that time has been frozen and that the main plan is loading during rapid transmigration. A few seconds later, the system says that he is being sent to the Hu family and that he must conquer 8 wives, which leaves him somewhat stunned. In the other world, 2 women were arguing over a game. A man opens the door and is surprised by what he sees. The 2 were almost coming to blows. Suddenly, another woman touches his shoulder, calling him her son and saying that many people envy his life, asking what other reasons he has to be happy. He looks at his mother and says that he is extremely happy and satisfied with everything, then runs to the girls saying that Hu has arrived. His mother looks a bit confused, asking what that means, but the young man just keeps smiling like a madman. The system appears and tells him that he must conquer 8 wives. The protagonist, now inside this new body, asks what kind of challenge this is, since it is clearly bringing benefits. The system says it was not it who chose this. He goes over to the 2 women and asks how far they would like to take the game. The protagonist tells the system that it would be much better if it had fewer rebellious tendencies. Also, it feels too distant to keep calling it system, so he decides to call it Zirui from now on. A woman calls him husband and asks why he is interested in playing mahjong with the sisters. Holding a tile, he smiles because in his youth he was ignorant, and only now has he awakened, surrounded by beautiful companions and countless forms of entertainment. The protagonist easily wins the game, and his other wives are happy to see that their husband is skilled in chess, music, calligraphy, and painting. This excites him even more, and he wonders what they should play next. But this was already expected of the 4 great talents of Jiangnan. He asks them if they know how to play Baccarat or Texas Hold'em. The system replies that it knows how to play mahjong, but does not know the connection to the 4 great talents. Annoyed, he asks whether this is truly the host's real nature. The protagonist explains that he was once unbeatable on all major chess and card platforms, and that even Gao Jin respects him. After battling 8 women for 300 rounds, they grow tired and begin to sigh. Zirui asks why his face is red, since it is just a card game and should not cause that. One of the wives asks how he can be so fierce. He simply laughs, saying he has not even used all his strength yet. The young woman asks if they can rest a little before playing against him again. The protagonist holds her face and asks if they could change the game. She becomes shy, saying he is annoying, wanting to practice indecent acts in broad daylight and still claiming to be a scholar. He fixes his gaze on her and says that in books there are indeed beautiful women, but none of them compare to his 8 wives. Zirui calls out to his master, stressing that they do not have enough time. The protagonist agrees because with 8 women, time will never be enough. Zirui takes a deep breath since that was not what it meant, and explains that the system has determined he passed the challenge and will now be teleported back to the Asura Hall in 3 minutes. Like a true machine, he thinks that 3 minutes might not be enough time for 8 wives. He goes to them, saying he urgently needs their help. They tell him to ask for whatever he wants. The protagonist asks how to make a girl happy, especially when she is crying too much. One woman says he should prepare delicious food. Another suggests a gift, like a beautiful handbag or nice clothes. But in the end, it all comes down to money. He needs to buy expensive cosmetics for her. The first wife becomes jealous and yells at him, asking if he's going to marry another woman. The others also start to get angry, trying to hit him and calling him useless. Suddenly, someone throws a book at him. The protagonist picks it up but does not know what it is. His mother asks if he really forgot the book he himself wrote. Zirui says that it is a book called The 36 Strategies of Tang Yin for Conquering Women. The protagonist calls Tang Bohu useless for hiding the greatest treasure of all worlds. Zirui warns that he is about to be taken back to his original world. He looks at all of them and says that it is hard for them to meet and hard for them to part, so may they meet again if fate allows it. His wives look confused, asking what he means, but the time has come. He begins to be taken back to his original world and they still do not understand anything. Xiachi opens his eyes and realizes that he is already back. Asura is still crying, shouting that this is too much bullying and that she no longer wants to live. Xiachi asks Zirui whether all the system's permissions have been unlocked, and Zirui says yes. The protagonist starts laughing, wanting to see whether the 36 strategies for conquering women are truly effective. He walks over to Asura, kneels down, and in a sweet voice calls her dear, saying that if she cries any longer, her eyes will end up swollen. She stops crying for a moment and he begins browsing some outfits in the system, while telling her that during the trial he had been observing her, trying to get to know her a little better. And that was why his goal was not to bother her in that way. Finally, he finds an outfit thinking that his instincts are screaming that this is the right one. Outside, Shuai Shuai complains that the clothes are so bizarre it is unbelievable that anyone could like them. Wangxi agrees, saying that the skirt is too short, not fashionable, and that the hallmaster will probably not like it. Asura, however, is enchanted and, with sparkling eyes, asks if it is for her. She thinks that everything the protagonist had been doing before was merely analyzing her, which shows that he is a very serious person. The three of them cannot believe what they are seeing, and Xiachi asks if she would like to try it on. Even though she likes the gift, she remains suspicious and asks why he is giving her clothes. Xiachi touches her face and leans closer, saying that later he will tell the entire world that he reserved the fishing lake just for her, and then she will understand. He admits that it was not the correct way to do everything, so he would like to ask forgiveness for his frankness. The disciples continue to be shocked by the whole scene. Asura perks up and says she's going to change, running off, but before leaving she asks whether he will wait for her there and not leave. Xiachi tells her she can go without worry and begins to smile, seeing that the job is done. He thinks that perhaps, if these 36 strategies for conquering women were applied to the four mistresses, it would be very good. The other disciples become even more irritated, seeing his sinister thoughts emerging. A short time later, Asura returns, saying she has changed clothes and chose to wear the first one. He looks at her, but Asura is a bit shy and asks whether it looks bad, since it is her first time wearing that kind of outfit. Xiachi simply swallows hard, saying nothing. Asura becomes even more frightened, asking why he is silent and not saying anything. He shows her a piece of jewelry, saying that it is not bad, but that he would love to see her try on the others as well. While she goes to change again, delighted, he begins to think that Lianhua and Julie have almost identical figures. Guys, I'm going to call Asura Lianhua, which is her original name from childhood. The protagonist starts imagining how Julie would look in those clothes. Lianhua returns, however a bit uncomfortable, saying that the skirt is too short and that because of that she is going to beat him to death with a stick. Xiachi agrees with her since the feeling is a bit strange. Lianhua shows another outfit and asks what he thinks, and he says it looks great. Still, she keeps changing to show them all to him, and each time she looks more beautiful. Lianhua finds several shopping bags and asks if all of that is for her. Xiachi smiles and says yes. Lianhua feels valued, thanking him for being so good to her, and hugs him, since now he is her favorite person. Sometime later, while they are walking, Lianhua says that he gave her many beautiful clothes, so she should also give something in return. Xiachi asks if there is really something that good, and she explains that it is a good item and will definitely be very useful. The little bears cover the cameras, saying that the scene cannot be shown. The guys say that he is very lucky and that the Master of Ceremonies' talent must be extraordinary, which makes them envious. Moreover, the trial did not seem that difficult, so maybe they can do it too. Lianhua takes him to her room and asks him to wait a bit. She runs to her drawers and manages to find it. Lianhua explains that it is a gift from her mother, and since she cannot use it now, she will give it to him as thanks. She shows the ring, called Embracing All Rivers. This ring can eliminate the oppressive pressure of an opponent's spiritual energy, and because of that, it is classified as a saint-level magical artifact. Other saint-level magical artifacts require at least the void-piercing realm to be used. She emphasizes that the ring carries her mother's blessing and can be used in all realms. Respectfully, he says that since the Master of Ceremonies is offering it so sincerely, he should accept it respectfully. Lianhua tries to say something but becomes embarrassed, asking how she can say it. Xiachi explains that they are friends, so she can say whatever she needs to without any problem. She is surprised to hear this, realizing that he already considers her a friend because what she wanted to ask was whether they could be friends. When she remains silent, Xiachi imagines that she might not have liked it and says that it was just what he thought. But she interrupts him, saying that she loved being his friend. She creates a sphere of water in her hand and Xiachi asks what it is. The sphere moves toward his chest and begins to release energy. Lianhua says that if in the future he encounters danger, he only needs to repeat her name silently in his heart 3 times. As long as there is water, she will immediately appear before him. After all this, he leaves the Hall of Judgment. Tilan approaches him emotionally, congratulating him for passing the Asura Hall test, and says that it opened his eyes because he did not expect to find a treasure like the protagonist in the outer sect, and now he needs to quickly announce this good news to the entire sacred domain. Xiachi starts laughing, saying that it was just luck. The three fools go up to him, asking whether that was not simply luck, since the Asura Hall Master was in a good mood and benevolently let him off. They say it is obvious since he carried various hidden treasures and clothes to please the Master of Ceremonies, and that this is something despicable. Xiachi tries to stay calm, saying that the clothes were given after the test was concluded, so they had no effect on the judgment. Moreover, he hates the word despicable, and if they think the judgment is wrong, they can just try it themselves. Shuai Shuai gets angry and asks who can guarantee that he did not have some secret deal with the Master of Ceremonies. Elder Lin interrupts them, shouting at Shuai Shuai, telling him to shut up, and asking how he dares slander the Hall Master and what he thinks the spiritual cultivation hall is. She emphasizes that everyone present saw Xiachi's evaluation and that this is undeniable. She asks Shuai Shuai if he knows what crime he has committed. He remains irritated, asking why he committed a crime. Wangxi tells him to calm down because the more he speaks, the more mistakes he makes, and it is not worth it, besides the fact that there will be plenty of time to deal with this later. Shuai Shuai finally yields and says that he expressed himself poorly. The elder walks over to Xiachi and also congratulates him for passing the spiritual cultivation hall test and for obtaining the qualification to take the inner sect examination. Therefore, she says she will pay close attention to him during the inner sect evaluation. He thanks her for the consideration, but thinks that she seems to have a mysterious past. The way she looked at him, although disguised, was definitely not something simple, and therefore he needs to pay close attention to this person. Shuai Shuai still believes that all of this is luck and thinks that it will not last forever. The boys run over to Xiachi asking what he and the Hall Master were doing in that room. The girls also go up to him asking if he is free to watch the stars with them at night. The treatment he is receiving makes Shuai Shuai even more irritated. Sometime later, the Julie Divine Palace announces its return. Miyu notices that she looks radiant and asks if something good happened. Julie explains that she personally saw Lianhua being humiliated and that she is in a great mood, as if she were walking under a spring breeze. Miyu asks if she went to the spiritual cultivation hall. On impulse, Julie says she went to see the protagonist, but then tries to cover it up. Miyu says that now that she has let it slip, she might as well tell everything, and asks whether she is really hiding secrets from her older sisters, which shows that she has truly grown up. Julie shouts that idiot Xiachi, completely out of nowhere, wanted to challenge the Asura Hall. Because of that, she was very afraid that he would be killed. She says that all of this was because of the Empress, who asked her to be Xiachi's direct master, so she had no other intentions. Mayu explains that it is normal to have other thoughts and asks why Julie is turning red. Sometime later, Julie is taking a bath, very happy and singing. She finishes and begins to step out of the water, holding something in her hand. Suddenly, Xiachi appears, nearly scaring her to death. She tries to cover it up, saying that she did nothing and that he does not need to think about improper things. The protagonist rushes over and grabs the item from her hand, asking if she is writing some secret martial arts manual again. With a mix of embarrassment and anger, she orders him to return the book immediately. As soon as he looks at it, he sees that it is a romantic comic. She snatches the book from his hand, shouting for him to give it back. Xiachi says that she is acting strangely and remarks that the manual she gave him before was more inspiring, and that she was eager to enter it for him. Julie says that the drawing is still not good enough and starts muttering to herself. He asks what she is saying, and even though she has a small breakdown from embarrassment, she congratulates him on qualifying for the inner sect evaluation. Xiachi feels a little disappointed to see that the news spread so quickly because his plan was to tell her personally. Julie is surprised, thinking that he values her quite a lot, and begins to act strangely again. Xiachi cannot understand why she's being so odd and stammering so much. He turns his back while she says that he no longer needs to worry about the bet, but she grows curious and asks what he is doing. Xiachi starts taking off his clothes, asking what bet she is talking about. Julie feels her heart race and asks if this is not moving too fast, but Xiachi remains confused, saying that this is normally the speed at which he takes off his clothes. With somewhat indecent thoughts, she says that they should first start the proper way, but Xiachi jumps into the pool beside her. Julie points out that they need to perform the bow as the matchmaker says, and as the country's customs require. Since he is underwater, he does not hear clearly what she said. Julie continues, saying that although she admits defeat, Xiachi still dealt with Lianhua on her behalf. However, this is a romance between master and disciple, so she needs to ask her older sister first. Already excited by the whole situation, she begins to wonder what her older sisters will say about it. Xiachi stands up and says that this immortal condensation pool is truly an immortal product, because after just one dive, he already feels renewed and invigorated. Julie keeps staring at his body, which seems to shine in her eyes. She realizes that her heart is beating even faster than before, and now does not know what is happening to her. Miyu asks the fourth mistress whether she has already begun training her young disciple, since he has just passed the Asura Hall evaluation and should rest a bit. But Julie is so enchanted with her future husband that she does not even hear what the second mistress said and asks if she needs anything. Miyu says she was looking for Julie because the disciple acceptance ceremony will be the day after tomorrow. Xiachi asks if he needs to prepare anything, and Miyu explains that no, there are just a few details she needs to point out. He takes the book from Julie's hand, stating that as a good disciple, he will remember every word. Julie becomes apprehensive, thinking that he can do whatever he wants, as long as he does not lean forward. Miyu begins to explain that on the day of the ceremony, all 6 gate masters will be present, and dealing with all of them will not be an easy task. The Kangming sacred domain is composed of the 6 gates, the outer sect, the divine palace, and the continent. Under the reign of Empress Jinyao, an appearance of peace has been maintained. It is unprecedented for the 4 immortals to accept disciples. And to help with that, this disciple has been accepted by the 4 immortal mistresses at the same time. Even before officially entering, he passed the Asura Hall test, considered the most difficult of all. Therefore, it will be a very lively ceremony. Guys, if you enjoyed the video, leave a like, comment, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new content. Thank you.